seeking to relax bail conditions so that he may be allowed to travel to Italy. Considering that in the circumstances of the present case, continuation of court proceedings or initiation of new ones by either party will prejudice rights of the other party. Considering that the above consideration requires action on the part of the tribunal to ensure that the respective rights of the parties are duly preserved. Considering that in the course of the proceedings, the parties advance conflicting arguments on the status of the two Marines. Considering that Italy argues that the two Marines are part of its armed forces and therefore as state officials exercising official function on board the Enrico Lexi pursuant to lawful authority, are immune from proceedings in India. Considering that India states that under Articles 95 and 96 of the Convention, immunity from jurisdiction of any state other than the flag states is available only to warships and government ships operated for non-commercial purposes. Admittedly, the Italian Marines were on board a merchant vessel, therefore the government of India was not obliged to recognize their claim of immunity under the Convention or any other principle of international law. Considering that the question of the status of the Marines relates to the issue of jurisdiction and cannot be decided by the tribunal at the stage of provisional measures. Considering that Italy argues that any risk to India's rights could be addressed by an order that is directed to both parties not to take any step of criminal investigation or trial during the pendency of the Annex 7 proceedings, and that could prejudice the rights of the other party. Considering that Italy maintains that its second submission is justified on at least 3 grounds as a consequence of the first measure requested by virtue of the applicable international standards of due process and in light of the circumstances assessed during the hearing held in camera. Considering that Italy argues, relying on the order of the tribunal in the Arctic Sunrise case, that international standards of due process would be violated if the measures restricting the Marines' liberty are not lifted promptly. Considering that, according to Italy, a freezing order in respect of the criminal proceeding is not enough, Italy's rights engaged by the prejudice that it is posed to its state officials cannot be adequately addressed or even addressed at all by an order that simply maintains the status quo. Considering that during the hearing, Italy undertook to abide by any decision of Annex 7 arbitral tribunal, the arbitral tribunal will render, and to return Sergeant Latori and Sergeant Gironi to India following the final determination of rights by the Annex 7 tribunal, if this is required by the word of the tribunal. Considering that in the view of India, the measures invoked by Italy would clearly jeopardize the effectiveness of India's rights at stake. Considering that India strongly objects to the allegation of Italy that it has violated international standards of due process. Considering that India further points out that the first submission by Italy does not indicate the period of time in which no judicial administrative measures may be taken against the two Marines. Considering that India emphasizes, in respect of the second submission by Italy, that it is its right to see that justice is done for the two dead fishermen. Considering that India further points out that the second submission by Italy corresponds to the request on the merits Italy makes under letter D of the relief sought in its statement of claim, and thus, if granted, which would prejudice the merits contrary to the object and purpose of provisional measures. Considering that as far as the undertaking by Italy is concerned, India states during the hearing that it has legitimate apprehensions of Italy's ability to fulfill its promises. Considering that the order must protect the rights of both parties and must not prejudice any decision of the arbitral tribunal to be constituted under Annex 7. Considering that the first and second submissions by Italy, if accepted, will not equally preserve the respective rights of both parties until the constitution of Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal, as required by Article 290, paragraphs 1 and 5 of the Convention. Considering that due to the above, the Tribunal does not consider the two submissions by Italy to be appropriate, and that in accordance with Article 89, paragraph 5 of the rules, the Tribunal may prescribe measures different in whole or in part from those requested. Considering that the parties disagree on which state has jurisdiction to decide the Enrique Alexei incident, and that such decision is to be taken by the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal to be constituted. Considering that, as was stated by Additional Solicitor General of India during the hearing, the Supreme Court has actually stayed its proceedings, and it would not be going too far to say that until the tribunal is constituted and hears the matter, there is no compelling assumption that the matter will be taken up and that there will be an adverse decision against Sergeant Latorre and Sergeant Gironi. Considering that the tribunal places on record assurances and undertakings given by both parties during the hearing, considering that it is appropriate for the tribunal to prescribe that both Italy and India suspend all court proceedings and refrain from initiating new ones which might aggravate or extend the dispute submitted to the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal, or might jeopardize or prejudice the carrying out of any decision which the Arbitral Tribunal may render. Considering that since it will be for the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal to adjudicate the merits of the case, the Tribunal does not consider it appropriate to prescribe provisional measures in respect of the situation of the two Marines, because that touches upon issues relating to the merits of the case. Considering that the Tribunal reaffirms its view that considerations of humanity must apply in the law of the sea, as they do in other areas of international law. Considering that the Tribunal is aware of the grief and suffering of the families of the two Indian fishermen who were killed. Considering that the Tribunal is also aware of the consequences that the lengthy restrictions on liberty entail for the two Marines and their families. Considering that any action or abstention by either party in consequence of this order should not in any way be construed as a waiver of any of its claims or an admission of claims of the other party to the dispute. Considering that the present order in no way prejudices the question of the jurisdiction of the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal to deal with the merits of the case or relating to the merits themselves, and leaves unaffected the rights of Italy and India, respectively, to submit arguments in respect of those questions. Considering that pursuant to Article 95, paragraph 1 of the rules, each party is required to submit to the Tribunal a report on compliance with the measures prescribed. Considering that it may be necessary for the Tribunal to request further information from the parties on the implementation of provisional measures, and that it is appropriate that the President be authorized to request such information in accordance with Article 95, paragraph 2 of the rules. For these reasons, the Tribunal, by 15 votes to 6, prescribes, pending a decision by the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal, the following provisional measures under Article 290, paragraph 5 of the Convention. Italy and India shall both suspend all court proceedings and shall refrain from initiating new ones which might aggravate or extend the dispute submitted to the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal, or might jeopardize or prejudice the carrying out of any decision which the Arbitral Tribunal may render. Judges who vote in favor for this decision are President of the Tribunal, Judges Akel, Wolfram, Jesus, Pavlak, Yanai, Kateka, Hoffman, Gao, Peik, Kelly, Attard, Kuli, Gomez-Robledo, and Judge Hunt Francioni. Judges voting against are the Vice President, Judges Rao, Jai, Kot, Lucky, Haida. Second, By 15 votes to 6, the Tribunal decides that Italy and India shall each submit to the Tribunal the initial report referred to in paragraph 138, not later than 24 September 2015, and authorizes the President after that day to request such information from the parties as he may consider appropriate. Judges voting in favor: President, Judges Akel, Wolfram, Jesus, Pavlik, Yanai, Kateka, Hoffman, Gao, Peik, Kelly, Attard, Kulik, Gomes-Robledo, and Judge at Court Francioni. Judges voting against: the Vice President, Judges Rao, Jai, Kot, Laki, Haida. Judge Kateka appends a declaration to the order of the Tribunal. Judge Peik also appends a declaration to the order of the Tribunal. Judge Kelly appends a declaration to the order of the Tribunal. Judge at Court Francioni appends a declaration to the Tribunal. Judge Jesus appends a separate opinion to the order of the Tribunal. Vice President Bukita appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the Tribunal. Judge Rao appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the Tribunal. Judge Jai appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the Tribunal. Judge Laki appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the Tribunal. Judge Haida appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the Tribunal. The sitting is closed.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.
So the International Tribunal has decided and opined that both India and Italy are to suspend all court proceedings in the Italian Marines case. This case will now go to an international tribunal which, according to ITLOS, has the jurisdiction to decide over this case. So clearly the ITLOS says the International Tribunal has jurisdiction over the dispute. This is the case of an Italian merchant vessel, Enrica Lexi. This was a merchant vessel that had shot dead 2 Indian Marines and 2 Indian fishermen. These 2 Italian Marines were on board that merchant vessel. They were in India in custody since 2012. Sergeant Lettore was permitted to go home for medical treatment. Sergeant Gironi was still in India. The court has now directed that all court proceedings in India and Italy should be suspended. The ITLOS says that the International Tribunal has jurisdiction over this dispute, and this is a verdict that has come 15 judges in favor and 6 against. The provisional measures that have been decided in this case include that India and Italy will not only suspend all court proceedings and not initiate any new court proceedings in this case, but each will submit their findings in a report to the International Tribunal. India Today's Anusha Soni now joins me with more on this story. Anusha, this clearly is indicative of court proceedings in India now coming to a standstill, and this matter going to the International Court.
Absolutely correct, Gaurav. We have to understand these matters of international litigation from the point of view of sovereignty. Often at stake is the sovereignty of the country, and of course cases like these involve difficult questions of law and also put at stake the international relationships between these two countries. However, in this case, United Nations, by a certain article of the United Nations to which India was a signatory, there was a right that this tribunal had. Earlier at the Supreme Court, when the hearing had happened, both the Italian Marines had moved an application to the Supreme Court in which they had not only sought an extension of time but had also said that this matter should go for arbitration. Now this tribunal that this court has recommended is the it involves a certain degree of arbitration. What they have essentially said is no more litigation on both the sides. What happens next in this case is that the additional Solicitor General who went there, represented the government, will now have to come forward, inform the Supreme Court what has happened so far, and from there Supreme Court will give further directions. Please understand that even in this matter, despite the order of the International Tribunal coming in, which does have a jurisdiction in this case, the Supreme Court will have its say, will have something to say, since this case is still going on there. The top court in the country will, hopefully take up this matter very soon, and the government will come forward and inform about this decision.
So, legally speaking, this matter now goes to the International Tribunal, and that it goes in for arbitration. Now, for a layman, arbitration perhaps would mean that the two Italian Marines, one, will not be tried for murder in India, and two, what comes out of arbitration is perhaps whether any punishment they'll undergo that punishment in Italy, and whatever compensation, if at all, needs to be paid to the two fishermen's families in India. Am I understanding it correctly?
Gaurav, of course, you're partly correct, but as you're pointing out, a lot of it is also speculation. Arbitration is a procedure in which both the parties come together, sit down on a table and try to discuss the terms. If there is a position, a conjecture where both the parties do not agree to what has happened, both can go back to the court of law. So arbitration is a process. We'll have to see that this entire tribunal that has been formed, what is the power of this tribunal? Are the recommendations of the tribunal binding, or can the India and Italy go back and argue the matter? However, what is at stake here? Will they be tried here? Will they be tried in Italy somewhere else? India will have to put its first report by as early as the end of September, as we just heard, and also the Italy will put forward its first report. And this, as you heard when the judge was reading that order, that we are shy of announcing any very detailed provisional measures,
yes,
because any observations made by us will be to the detriment of the other party.
Okay, so they haven't decided in favor or against any party in this case, but matter now goes into arbitration. Smita Sharma, my colleague, also joins me with more on this. Smita, the External Affairs Ministry was also monitoring this case very closely. External Affairs Ministry, Home Ministry, the Law Ministry, all working very closely on this case. Is this in a way a setback for India, that it's not Indian jurisdiction but international court where this matter now goes into for arbitration?
Well, yes, as if 26th of August is when that Supreme Court is actually hearing that case, and if there is clarity now that the Indian court's rulings will not actually take jurisprudence compared to the International Convention, because remember, the judge who was giving that ruling right now in the tribunal cited Article 291, stating that the International Convention actually is the one that will rule compared to the domestic proceedings that might have been initiated. So in that case, what I am being told is the Ministry of External Affairs is expected to come out with a statement very shortly. It will be a very carefully balanced and a very carefully edged sort of a statement, Gaurav.
Yes.
Not saying that we have lost the case or saying that we are disappointed in any sort of a way, because remember, at the moment the Foreign Ministry entourage is in Egypt with the Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj. So the Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar and the External Affairs spokesperson Vikas Swarup accompanying Sushma Swaraj there on that 4-day-long trip. But this is one relationship that has cast a lot of shadow over the bilateral relationship, yes, with India and Italy, or even the India and the EU relationship, where we saw the India-EU summit being cancelled off, this being one of the major reasons, which was supposed to be earlier in March this year. So clearly this is this is a proceeding that is going to be watched very, very carefully here on, Gaurav.
Smita Sharma and Anusha Soni, for the moment, many thanks for joining me. Continue to track that story. I will come back to you for more. A quick break. There's lots more coming up on the other side of these messages. Keep watching India Today.